I think we're good.
Okay, good.
Let's do this. What are we doing?
Perfect.
Why am I here
now?
again?
Now that our brains are fully cooked,
Fully cooked, because this is day 3 of setup. Yes. Yeah, fly in
Yeah,
on Sunday, load trucks, get it all prepped, put the floor down on
and you don't even get to see the first day.
Monday. No, no. It's actually really strange. After doing the math, and let's be clear, everyone, I'm just editing out COVID, so we're just going to forget it because everyone missed that year, right? So
No.
it's the not named year, so that's fine. But ignoring that, this will actually be my 30th consecutive Gen Con. And so to miss the first day of my 30th consecutive Gen Con's kind of a little wild, but my goddaughter is graduating a CSI agent, which is the coolest thing ever. And so absolutely just got to be there to support her. So
No, absolutely.
yeah, up at 4 o'clock in the morning tomorrow and on a plane, and I touch down and run over and see her graduate. And a couple hours later, I'm back on a plane and arriving here at like 4 o'clock in the morning or whatever it is. So
Well, first things first. For anyone who happens to live under a rock and really enjoys BattleTech, who are you?
my name is Randall Bills. I am the creative director for Catalyst Game Labs. I have been working in this awesome industry for nearly 30 years now, and nearly all of it in some capacity with BattleTech. I do a lot more than BattleTech. Currently Ray Arastia is the BattleTech line developer. Aaron Cahill is the assistant line developer, but I still step in and assist them both on the upper end, helping get product out the door and bouncing ideas off of them. I also step in and help to assist on a given product if it needs it, because particularly with our Kickstarter, it's just so massive.
Sometimes things get very intricate.
Exactly. And so,
many SKUs.
like the Alpha Strike box set, right? That was kind of like somebody needs to dive on that and get that out the door. So I dove on that. But yeah, so I've been the line developer and I was the assistant line developer, obviously at the very beginning. I did art direction for a couple years under the Fan Pro years. I've done just about every job there is to do around BattleTech, and I like to joke that I just followed it from company to company over the last 30 years, and they kept trying to ditch me in some back alley, and then they would get to their
Are you sure you
business.
don't want to stick with the company?
That's right. And then they'd show up at the office the next day, and I'd be sitting at my desk already, like typing away. I'm here. So they tried to ditch me, and so just kind of by dint of longevity, I have become the face of BattleTech. And so yeah, that's kind of who I am and what I do, and I love being here. Like I said, 30 straight years at Gen Con, and it is a giant, horrible beast to get through.
Which
and
is this the 30th?
for me, this is my 30th Gen Con in a row. And then, of course, you have people like Rhett that are like, I've
What's
got
even
like
30? They
well,
were
30.
talking about.
That's youngin'.
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
up at like 46 or some crazy insanity, right? It's awesome. Well, I remember, I think when I hit 20, I was feeling all like, yeah, right. I'm like, woohoo, I got 20 years in this. And then I went to a panel, and Margaret Wise is walking across to sit down, and she told how long she had been at the time, which she's almost back to year 1. And I'm like, I'm just gonna quietly go sit in my corner and put my dunce cap on. I'm like, nope, no more bragging, no more nothing, right? There's
I
there's
accidentally
always
met-
giants ahead of you that are amazing and awesome. And being able to like meet her for the first time and thank her like all those years ago, that like when I found um the Dragonlance trilogy, like that was just a watershed turning moment for me, right, in my transition into geekdom. And so to be able to actually just shake her hand and thank her for that, those all those years of experiences, that was just amazing. And I've done the same thing like 10 years ago when we released Leviathans for the first time, which was my original first game design. I think it was Matt or somebody. There's a line of people, they're buying the game. I'm feeling all awesome. And somebody's like, is that Ed Greenwood? And I turn around and Ed Greenwood standing in line holding my box set to buy it. And I'm like geeking out of my mind, right? Ed freaking Greenwood. And it's just I'm a big believer in we all have something or someone's
Mhm.
that we will lose our mind over, right? That we
Oh,
just it's so cool and so amazing, and we just totally geek out about. And so
I have
I'm
mine
a
planned out this year.
yeah. So I'm a big believer in that, right? Like I had a friend of mine, Chris, who is 20 New York Times bestsellers under her belt, just this
Mhm.
astonishingly amazing, brilliant writer. And also before that, worked in newspaper and television, and so like interviewed heads of state. Like she has it all. And she's many years ago was on at a World Science Fiction Convention, and before he passed away, Ray Bradbury walks on the elevator, and she just stopped, like just melted into a little puddle, couldn't even open her mouth. And I'm like, yeah, I would have, yeah,
Yeah,
you
yeah, I
bet,
get that.
you bet, no problem. So
Anything else, I'd be
yeah,
disappointed.
yeah, exactly right. So no, I'm a big believer in. I'm also a big believer in that we are all geeks. Every person on the planet is a geek about something. They
Mhm.
may not have found that thing that they geek out about yet. And if they haven't, I'm happy to try to help them.
No, no,
Feed them.
absolutely.
Do you like this? Do you like this? Do you like this? Right? That's the glory of this industry. Is it's just keeps growing, and it gets bigger, and more cool things are done, and
And the
you know,
bigger that gets, the more publicity it can get, and more people
and
get
more
attracted,
people
and
come
more
in, and the tent
creators.
goes bigger, and more of the really cool stuff happens on the edges.
Hmm.
I love D&D 5. Don't get me wrong. I played a ton of it, right? And yet I love running over to the indie press every year, and I'll walk up to Jason. I'll be like, "What's the two new indie RPGs that are my must buy and read?" Right? And
Hmm.
he'll be like, "Oh, this thing and this thing. You won't believe what they're doing," and I love being able to do that.
Oh no,
And
absolutely.
so as much as sometimes you look over at D&D and it's this just towering edifice, it really is something that allows all the rest of us to come into the tent as well. And so I love it.
Oh, absolutely. Even though I've had so much more time with D&D itself, first being introduced into personally the Shadowrun side of things, I have had just as many like, oh my God, that is insane moments that I have in years of D&D as
Oh,
well.
absolutely.
Well, and plus, of course, now I'm playing with people who understand Shadowrun more than the previous people
Yeah,
who I
sure,
knew understood D&D.
sure.
So it still has such a rich world to fall into.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I will. I like to say, outside of my family and my faith, geekdom is the third pillar of my life. It just fills every aspect of what's left after my faith and my family. And a huge part of that, of course, is because I've been able to play with my family, been able to play with my friends all of these years, getting together with friends. In fact, I'm doing this world tour for the BattleTech's 40th anniversary, and I'm running into some high school friends who were there when I picked up BattleTech the very first time, right? So to still have that connection is really cool. And so BattleTech will, as much as I'm an equal opportunity gamer and geek
Mhm.
person, right? I'll sit down and watch any geeky movie and play almost any geeky game. Of course, BattleTech is this towering thing for me.
Of course.
But no, Shadowrun has always been there as well. I remember walking into games. Um, oh my gosh, Game Depot. That's what it is. Tempe, like my home away from home in high school. Local game store. Dave and Patty were just amazing all these years, almost like second parents to us.
Mhm.
And I walk in, a group of us walk in to look at whatever the latest BattleTech stuff was in 1989, and there's Elmore's Shadowrun poster on the wall. And like we all just stop and are like, the what is that? Right? Like just utterly mind-blowing image. And and now, I'll be honest, we then like bought like 4 copies of the book when it came out and couldn't figure out how to play the game, but that's a whole other thing.
Yeah, yeah, no, no, no. It's
Uh,
fine.
in fact, but it's actually really cool because to me that was actually one of the very first games where the universe mattered more than the mechanics. And I'm not sure there had been a game that way, because then it was mostly unplayable. Some people might quibble on that, but most would agree. But then it was so uniquely cool that it could survive the 3 years to get the second edition, where suddenly, okay, now we can actually play it, right?
Hmm.
And how cool that was. You could create a universe where everyone's gonna just keep slogging through. Um, Sorry,
Oh, no, no, no.
there's something on the screen. I'm like, is there something after our recording?
No.
This thing that's just so cool that it could survive, right? And so,
Mhm.
yeah, I've played far more BattleTech. I've done far more stuff with BattleTech, but Shadowrun's always been there as a good love of my life as well. In fact, it was just so incredibly cool to have to be able to. I was just on the side of the amount of time and effort that was required to create the replica of the first edition book. Huge shout out to Matt for, I mean, we literally had to buy 3 books off of eBay and cut them apart and scan them, because you had to scan them for different things. The art had to be scanned in a unique way, the text had to be scanned in a unique way. It was a colossal amount of effort. So huge shout out to Matt and to Ian for the so many hours they put in to create this replica. And like, I'm picking up the book and you like open it up and it literally transports you back 35 years. It's just so amazing. And then like, the Elmore's cover image is down on the stairs leading up
Hmm.
out of the convention
Oh,
center
yeah.
over here.
Going like as you're about to go across
Yeah, as you're
the.
going across the skywalks, you
Mm.
can see it there. But then the other experiences, like talking about, like, I was in the 80s, so Satanic Panic, that was everywhere.
You got to let that
Uh,
diffuse.
right, but interestingly enough, so Chad's mom then didn't quite want us to be playing D&D, right? And we're like, okay, whatever. But that actually then had us playing Palladium. And then Palladium led us to, Ninjas and Super Spies and Superheroes Unlimited and TMNT. And, it actually, in hindsight, I'm actually kind of glad, because I've had many years of playing D&D, right?
Yeah.
I mean, great years. But we very well could have been one of those groups that have only played D&D in the last, 40, 50 years, as opposed to being able to see that there's just this incredibly rich, vibrant community. And now some of the RPGs coming out, like one of my favorites in the last couple of years, Free League. I mean, obviously Jason's going to get mad at me. I really do think Free League might be the best RPG publisher right now. Their stuff is amazing. I, I, I hope that as players are interacting with ours, they can put them on a shelf next to what Free League's doing. Going back to um, Tales from the Loop, when they really kind of exploded on the scene. And then if anyone has not played their Aliens RPG, just please, 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 and you love playing RPGs, play that game, because it has this incredibly cool, like, I can start to panic, and there's plenty of other games that have like a, panic, lose your willpower type of mechanic.
Like a almost like a resource.
Yeah, kind of like a resource, but my failure can then start bleeding over into your failure. So as I panic, the panic bleeds over into your panic. And so like everyone can start losing it, getting freaked out, and running away. And particularly if you had a really good GM, my oldest son Bryn ran it for us. And it was one of the best RPG sessions I've had in years and years and years.
No, absolutely. Like
And
trying to make sure it's a group activity, so like it's not like mana or anything like that.
yeah,
Where like if somebody runs
no,
out
no,
of
no.
said
If you
resource,
start really screwing up, it can
it's going
start
everywhere.
affecting the whole party, right? And so that's just the type of thing that I like talking about when I talk about RPGs. That like I said, I'm a big believer that I play every type of game. Like in my heart of hearts, I really love maps, area control, giant 4X style games, Twilight Imperium or War Room. If anyone loves Eclipse and Twilight Imperium and also loves historical games, you must play Nightingale's War Room, right? Please play that game. But then RPGs is this other thing, right? Like
Mhm.
they bring some experience to the table that is nearly impossible to capture in any other type of gaming. And it creates experiences that you just remember for years and years and years. And I'm one of the big things about BattleTech, I constantly getting asked, like, how did you do it? How did you bring BattleTech back? Because, you know, 10 years ago or so, it was nearly dead. Nearly dead. Um, and and one of it's like, then, how did it last for 40 years?
Mm.
And I could talk for hours and have talked for hours because we've tried to figure it out, right? Like, how did we do it? I have, like I said, I could talk for hours, give you several really good parts that came about. At the end of the day, I still think there was 10% magic sauce that, came up,
At just the
12s
right
for us,
time.
double sixes, whereas it could have been double ones, like any other game has done. But again, I think another part of it is that BattleTech lends itself to a narrative experience. Every roll of the dice brings out a story. My dice betray me all the time. If anyone has watched me do live streaming on my games, they will quickly understand I somehow break maths. And it really is terrible. But I'd be at a table and I'll be like, Gauss rifle on a 3 and I roll a 2, right?
Hmm.
And in a lot of tabletop miniature games, again, equal opportunity gamer, I play a ton of tabletop miniature games. I love them. But it's a little more the mechanic side that I'm enjoying the interaction. But then the story side on BattleTech, I roll that too, and I'm immediately like, oh man, when I get back off the field, my tech's getting fired. He didn't align the targeting right. And everyone
Being
around
able
the
to,
table will be like, oh yeah, and they'll break out into a whole story, right?
yeah.
And so it just lends itself again to this role playing. So it's almost like a pseudo role playing that happens at the table. And that's what we cherish. That's what we're looking for, I think, most
And
gamers.
directly built into the combat as well.
Absolutely,
With a
directly built
lot,
into it.
with I've noticed with a lot of RPGs, and a lot of the time it does fall down to the group in which you're playing with occasionally. But a lot of games just aren't geared towards having story and combat happen at the same
Yeah,
time.
and I think a big part of it is the design space for a lot of tabletop miniatures is very thin,
Hmm.
and so it's hard to have a story unfold. Whereas BattleTech is a much thicker, as a lot of people who've played are like, oh yeah, it's so much thicker, right?
Hmm.
But the very thickness of it allows for the story to blossom as the game is being played. And so, yeah, like I said, I've talked ad nauseum about how important that side of that is. And again, we all want that. Even when you're playing Ticket to Ride, you still want a story because I think that's what we interact with. My family when we play Sheriff of Nottingham, that can be a 3.5 hour game for us because it immediately becomes a role playing scenario.
Sheriff from Nottingham is where you're like smuggling.
Yes, you're
Yes.
smuggling and you have the different carts and you got to lie to the sheriff, right? And it's instant complete role play.
Oh
We
yeah.
become the character like suddenly the voice comes out and the whole
You're
and
like,
I'm
of
terrible at
course.
accents, right?
Yes,
My
I'm
parent
only
my
bringing in
parents are
three chickens.
exactly chickens. What? I didn't do that.
This doesn't feel like chicken.
Exactly. I know I love that game, but again, it's one of those where it's a board game, just like any board game, and yet somehow has that element where you immediately fall into a story. And I really think that's why one of those games just exploded, right? Is when you have that ability to have the story take over even in a board game, then you've got a good game.
Well, of course, you can have all of the story built into your combat, but also just the giant free for all worlds that you have in this universe that give you a limitless pool of culture of and all of these different interactions that you can
Yeah,
have
both.
between places.
Yeah, talking with a lot of other manufacturers, a lot of other game companies,
Mhm.
and they will talk about and D&D is kind of special because it's the first, right? And the first always wins
Oh
in
well, yeah.
almost any
Well,
endeavor,
everything
right?
is going to be novel, of course.
Exactly. And so I kind of set that slightly aside, but there's very few games in our industry that are a ever publishing, ever growing game that has stayed the test of time. It's a really small number. And and we call it a lifestyle game, right? It's not like a lot of RPGs where you're in, you grab one or two books, you play it for a couple of months, you had a great time, and you're on to the next thing, right? That's not the case with BattleTech and Shadowrun. There's something about it that sinks its teeth into you and never lets go. And a big part of it absolutely is they're so big and they're so large that it allows you to fit your story. You can craft your own narration and build up this whole cool thing that happens within the web of what's coming from the publisher. And before I started working at Fast, I did exactly that, right? In fact, the for those that are longtime BattleTech players, there was a magazine called Battle Technology that first came out in the 80s. And the thing that made it unique for the time, because there was Dragon Magazine and all these amazing, cool game publishers that were coming out, but Battle Technology's conceit was that it was as though it was done as though it was published from within the universe. So all of the ads, even like the mast of who was writing it, was all as though it was published from a BattleTech world, right? And it was just mind-blowingly cool, right? But in one of those, it talked about it asked us to write in where were you and your mercenary unit when the Forced Succession War started. And so I'm like, oh my gosh. And so I typed up this whole thing because we'd had a whole thing. Like there's like two sentences in the original 3025 for the Banshee talking about the 3S variant. There was a prototype that had vanished. Like that was the sentence. And so me and my buddies are immediately like, that was our mercenary unit. We got down on that planet and we stole that 3S. And I typed that up and I sent it in. And of course, this is in the dark ages when it was on tablets and we mailed it in the Pony Express. And then like, almost a year later, I'm at a convention walking around. The latest issue of the Biotechnology comes out. I'm flipping through the pages with my friend and suddenly I see my letter. And I just stopped dead. And this wave comes over. I mean, this was 93, 92, 93, somewhere right there. And this wave comes over me of like, oh my gosh, I published. And it was written so badly. Like I pulled it out now and it's almost painful to read,
It
right?
was the energy though.
But it didn't matter, right? It was my first. And so again, it was I had this whole thing built that my friends and I played for years off of like two sentences. And that's what both BattleTech and Shadowrun does. And D&D certainly does that as well, right? It creates this lifestyle where and on the back end is the pain that we inflict on ourselves because these universes are so massive and so big that the writing of it, the continuity of it is a massive lift, right? And we love it. We're total masochists. But a huge shout out to
it's a labor of love.
It is such a labor of love, but it is a labor, right? Like there's a lot of game companies that would take one look at these and be like, no way, I'm not touching that. It is so much effort. And both BattleTech and Shadowrun basically have volunteer fact checkers that help read the fiction or read the source books and help us try to do that. Huge shout out to them that we love them. Even when, they make me rewrite parts of a novel because I'm like, oh crap, I did totally forget that, didn't I? Yep, there's this one chapter, 3 in this book 30 years ago. Oh, I can't believe I missed that and got to rewrite it. But that's just the nature, right? And so then that's what fans love. That's what we love. It's it's awesome.
Oh my god. Yeah, no. Because for the last year and a half, Teslin has been running our Emerald Glitch game, our Shadowrun Emerald Glitch. Which, by the way, up to we are now the front runner for views on GenCon TV.
Oh, that's awesome!
Yeah,
Congratulations!
Yeah. We're averaging right around 3.5K.
So then Peter Atkinson owes you guys.
That's kind of what I'm thinking.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting out of that. Sweet. Next time you see him, you'll be like, you owe me, man.
Well, because Tom is extending a universe that he was in part created with one other person, don't recall the name. Max took over in season 2, and then in season 3, Tom came back on to GM. So it like that in and of itself has been a story that has already hit its 2.5, 3 year mark.
Ah, I love it. Yeah,
And
yeah,
it's all in
yeah.
the same universe. And
Yeah.
like we've gone forward and then back in time one more time just to
And
it doesn't matter. We can
I,
play around with the
I
worlds.
know, and like you explain that to a non-gamer or a gamer that's just starting to get their feet wet,
Hmm.
and they're like totally freaking out, like,
What
what?
do you
This
mean?
game goes on for years. Why would I want to do that, right? And I'm like, no, 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 no.
I just
I
gotta give it a
just
shot.
You don't have to do that. Do a little one shot on the side. You're all good, but you could. And the possibilities, like those campaigns, right, are just the dividends that come out of that. The friendships you forge, the
Hmm.
memories, the experiences are just, and like, it's like I said, as much as I'm a giant, huge gamer, and as much as BattleTech has meant so much to me, if none of my family was into gaming at all, and if I didn't have friends that were into gaming,
Hmm.
I don't think it would be nearly what it is because it's the connections we forge. It's all the years of being able to think back and the games that I played with my kids and watching them grow up and then watching them starting to run games and then run those games for others and it's just to me it is a medium that facilitates the connections that are the best part of gaming. The community and us are the best part of gaming in my mind. And it's just and of all the types of gamings, I think role playing facilitates that better than any of it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's the difference between sitting down and watching an hour and a half, 2 hour movie,
Yeah.
and like spending years watching your favorite series.
Yes. Yep.
And I'm always going to be, partial to the latter.
Absolutely.
And being able to like go back through and pinpoint moments and throw a reference that people are like, oh shit,
Yeah,
yeah,
right. I
that did
love
happen.
being able to do that. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. Awesome stuff.
just digging into a little bit more about you, Randall.
Sure.
From the time that you wake up before you go into the office and start up work, and then afterwards, whenever you finally tell yourself that you're done for the day.
Yeah, I'm really terrible at that part.
Yeah, and me too,
As
me too.
everyone will tell me.
What do you do?
Oh,
What is
wow.
your leisure time,
Um, well
if
that
you can call it leisure time?
yeah. Again, I don't know. So like last year, I'm setting the booth up,
Mhm.
and another friend that is in the industry comes up to me, and he's talking to me, and he's like, "How you doing?" I'm like, "Well, I'm sitting here, and things are delayed because last Wednesday, we're saying this Wednesday when I left to come do this interview, we were basically done. It's the fastest we have ever done. It's
Mhm.
a brilliant build. Not exactly sure what happened, right?
Well,
Last
we're gonna
year,
start it up,
but
and
we're
everything is gonna
it just
crumble.
burned down to the ground, burned down, tipped over, burned down, and fell in the swamp. But this one stayed. Um, and then, but last year we kind of had the same thing, right? Where Tuesday was amazing. We got to Wednesday, and the whole day burned to the ground, right? We were there till like 7:30, and then we're in at like 7 o'clock in the morning the next day on the
Mm.
opening day, still sprinting, right? So he comes over to me and he's asking, how you doing? And I'm like, well, right now I'm hot and I'm sweaty and I'm super frustrated and I want to just yell at somebody and I got my angry music going and um and then I'm like, but at the same time, at 10 o'clock tomorrow, when we always make it, the doors are going to open and they're going to sprint in and it's going to be glorious. Just a wave of geekdom is going to wash over us
Mhm.
and we're going to be shaking hands and they'll thank us and we will thank them and it's glorious, right? And he's like, how do you do that? How do you keep that? He's like, because I'm feeling really burned out. And I don't know how to explain, right? Like most game designers only last 10 years or so, maybe 15 years before they then burn out and then they go out of the industry. Now they'll come back,
Mhm.
right? This
Well,
industry
with a
never lets you
new
go.
attitude.
Exactly. But they'll go do something else for a couple of years to recenter, to unburn themselves because this is a really brutal industry, right? In fact, Bryn's example last year was, or no, sorry, we were talking about it last night. He's like, we're masochists, and we're all kind of laughing. He's like, no, 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 no. One of the definitions of masochism is that you are appreciative of the pain that is inflicted upon you. That is one of the definitions. And so last night we were absolutely there till like almost 8 o'clock at night. So we're back in the hotel, we're exhausted, hot, sweaty, tired, and and totally underpaid, overworked, all the things that this hobby will give you. But we are so glad that we have the opportunity to be totally overworked and hot and sweaty and flogged to do this, right? So we absolutely are masochists. And you just have to be. This is a brutal industry. But I can't explain why I'm now reaching nearly 30 years. I think 2 more years and I'll hit 30 years working in this industry. And I still just love it to death, right? I still just can't believe that I have the opportunity to do this, that I get to be around so many amazing, cool people and design games with them and make up cool things and write and all of this, right? And so I'm not exactly sure how, particularly because I'm a total workaholic. My family will tell you that.
I know.
Yeah. Everyone knows who knows me knows I'm a terrible workaholic.
I don't even work that closely with you.
And again, luckily, the mitigation is that so much of the work I do, I'm able to work with my family, right? So like my eldest son, Bryn, has been working with Catalyst directly for years and years. He's the Leviathan's line developer. He's also the convention coordinator on a lot of our different shows. So I work with him closely nearly every day. Kenyon has his first game coming out. We're already working on the next game that he's going to be doing. Rihanna often comes to shows. Like my whole family's here, right? And I remember last year I was sitting taking a meeting, and then I looked, and Tara, my wife, is running a register. Bryn is like helping out with the line, I think. Kenyon was running a demo of his game, and then behind me, Rihanna was helping the Wishes, which is Lauren and Heather Coleman are the owners of Catalyst, but they also have a side hustle, if you will, of like, I think they're up to 8 or 9 toy and game stores now, and they have a booth there. So like my whole family is right around me, all engaged in this, crazy endeavor. And I literally just teared up, so thankful that I get to do that with my family. And so now outside of that, again, like, I'll finish work, and then some days I finish work and I'm literally sitting down to play a game, in the table that I just set up. Or a lot of times I'll finish work and then be over play testing something, which is, not really not work.
It's half work.
Yeah.
It's like whenever I was, like a little bit burnt out, and then I loaded up Frostpunk just to
No, there are definitely times when, like, the same thing when we're getting the Frostpunk RPG license and working on that. And yeah, one time I spent like a whole day playing Frostpunk, and then once again I'm giggling at the fact that I get to play Frostpunk, and that's work I got to do. Or like, we're doing Runefire, which is our new the Dragonfire game for Pathfinder, so deck building Pathfinder game. And I realized I'd spent like 2 or 3 days just scouring, learning their lore and looking up the monsters and all of that, and I'm just like, this is crazy.
I'm nerding out right now.
I'm totally nerding out. Just,
I'm being like progressive about it. Like I'm getting stuff done.
Yeah. So, but I'll play games with my family. I do like watching TV. So there's plenty of TV shows that I'll catch in the evening. Often Tara's mom lives with us, Nana. And so often at, 7 or 8, we'll all sit down and watch some show. I think we're rewatching The Rookie because Nathan Fillion.
Fair.
So yeah, it's and then this year, this year's been just awesome and amazing and brutal because there's a lot of family stuff that's gone on. But then I'm also doing the tour, and so I will probably be gone nearly 5 months of this whole year, out traveling around, hitting game stores and sitting at game store tables and playing with those communities, and that's been, as I was waxing philosophical earlier, about how it is the connection, it is us sharing real connections through the medium of gaming that is so powerful to me. And now I'm doing it at a level that I've never done it in all my 30 years or, 40 plus years of gaming. I'm up over, I think, like 1,500 people now that I've shaken their hands and handed out a patch, and, probably shake 500 plus people easily here at Gen Con. And that's just really amazing to me. It's really awesome. And I'm so grateful to this community that has been with us through all of the dark, days when I'm, stand. Sometimes I joke it felt, standing alone on the ramparts in the rain and the dark, and I've refused to let this die. And the couple of team members that are with us, and those diehard fans that stayed with us, and also the brand new fans that are barely here, right? Like, I'm up at Gamescom Canada, and sitting at the table were like some old guys, like, old farts like me that had been around for, 40 years playing the game. Others that like played really hard back in the 80s and early 90s and have been away for 20 years, or brand new players. There's like this 11-year-old girl who comes in, sits down at the grinder, and by the end of the day, she had stayed there the whole day. And by the end of the day, she's in a dragon that hasn't died yet, lost an arm, like dragging a gimpy leg, but she had 3 kills under her belt. And all the older guys are trying to figure out, how do we gang up to kill her, right? And like, that was just glorious. And so to see that everyone can still, regardless of age, gender, you name it, can sit down and love BattleTech and just love gaming. That's magical to me. That's glorious.
No, absolutely. Is there a moment in these past conventions that you have seen a table that what is your most eventful table?
Oh man.
At a convention?
Oh, there's actually been so many stories I could share. I've had stories of so I remember many years ago, going back to the Dragonlance trilogy. Margaret Wise and then Tracy Hickman were the 2 co-authors. I've met them both now, but I'll shake their hands and thank them. And Tracy Hickman was telling the story of, there is a character in the Dragonlance, a knight Sturm. And Sturm was this knight and was super knighty, super honorable and trying desperately to live up to honor in a world without it. And in the end, he dies. And like, when I read it as a teenager, I totally teared up. It was a crazy cool, awesome scene, right? Well, Tracy would tell the story of like 20 years after that, in the first Iraq War, guy serving there, and he afterwards comes up. Man, I'm gonna tear up even talking about this. He comes up and he tells Tracy this story of how he, as a teenage boy, read these books and fell in love with Sturm and wanted to live up to that honor, right? Live up to that level of responsibility and taking on whatever needs to happen to save those that he loves. And he was serving, and he was horribly wounded, and he's laying there, and most of the rest of his platoon had been wiped out, and he's laying there thinking, I'm going to die. And he thought to himself, that's not what Sturm would do. And so he got himself up and got the only other person that was still alive and put him over his shoulder and carried him like several miles back to safety. And so he handed Tracy his Purple Heart. And Tracy just broke down and was like bawling, like, how do you respond to that, right? And so I have had people come up to me with somewhat similar stories to say, my life is radically different and better than it would have been because of what you've done, right? And that I've done the same thing. I've had moments of crying and sharing it, and then Bryn and I, my oldest, will sit and talk, and it's not really that much about me. It's about what again, it's that connection, right? It's through this medium of this thing that we love, where we can find so much meaning and we can find in ourselves to be better. And so I have, I think it'd be pretty easy for me to get ridiculously arrogant and be like, woo, woo, it's all me, right? Now, luckily, my wife would break my kneecaps and my children and my family would be lined up right behind him to break my kneecaps if they even remotely saw me doing that. But luckily, I know it's not me. I just happen to be a medium through which this amazing thing can happen, just like it happened for me, just like it happens for others. And so those are, and so I could go on and on about the really fun parts of the stories. Like I said, that 9-year-old girl, or another table, I think it was in Salt Lake, where there was these two 10-year-old boys, and two of my friends from high school were there, and the 10-year-old boys knew the game now better than they did, and schooling him, and like, Gauss rifled off one head and heavy Gauss rifle off another head, and we're just laughing our heads off, having the best time, right? Glorious. So many stories like that.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, the stories that will stay with me for the rest of my life and beyond is those moments where we can sit at a table and share that our lives have been changed because of our connection through this thing we love. And that's just, I'm so incredibly grateful that I can be a part of that for anyone, much less my own, how much better I am at trying to be better, to be friends, and to stand there and help people when they need it, even when I don't even know that I'm helping people when they need it. That's amazing to me.
No, absolutely. It really does work as the perfect medium for seeing how people not react to not necessarily real stress, unless you're just that good at role playing. But
I did make my son cry once role playing, so I was,
that's just good acting.
No, it was just a side really quick.
Yeah.
Fantasy Flight came out with a series of how the world ended, or end of the world RPGs, and one was an Alien Invasion, and one was Return of the Old Gods, and they were ridiculously fun. But you start out like, you make your character, and it is yourself, only slightly more heroic. And it's, you build the characters in an interactive little game, which is really awesome. And then you start as though you're role playing at the table, and the world starts ending. What do you do? And as the GM, I was the GM, right? Within the game, and the house collapsed on me and I died. And then what does Bryn and the rest of the table do? Then rotating over into the macro of, the meta of being the GM, and totally got him teared up because of how it all played out. And so, yeah, that was
That is wild.
that was one of my more cherished moments, just for that. Like, yeah, right. But again, I have also heard so many other stories of where just within the games and how they're played and how people interact with them, the support, the love they can feel, the emotions that they can have. And don't get me wrong, I'm well aware that there are um, problem parts of our industry, and I'm not trying to say that they don't exist.
Sure.
But from my experience, again, having
I also appreciate you saying our industry. I will take all the credit.
No, and but the point I wanted to make there was that, yes, there are problems there. Yes, we're trying to be better, but the internet amplifies it so much out of proportion.
Oh, absolutely.
Like I said, having hit dozens of game stores and thousands of players over the last couple of months, they've all been amazing. And the number of people at tables, and every stripe, color, you name it, the trans people I've met, it's been amazing, the love and support that you can find in local communities, and so, most of the internet, just wave it away. That's not the game. The game is here amongst us. The game is in the communities that you have forged. That's what matters. That's where the support and love will come from.
No. That was beautifully said. Sorry. That is just a good. I need that on a T-shirt, because because that is amazing. I think in the way that I play most games, it is a little bit like gambling. And by that, I mean gambling cool points. It
Yeah.
is all about how many cool points you are willing to gamble to role play effectively. And if you win, you win.
Nice. I like that.
And
That's
and
fun.
just how like much you are willing to dive into the role.
Yeah, put it out there. Well, I like telling the story of, I still will sometimes play a game and it's just, the whole beer and pretzels. We're having a fun time.
Exactly.
Who cares? Whatever, right?
It can be a little bit surface level.
Exactly. And like, it's the Paranoia when I used to play that back in the day. Anyone who has not played Paranoia, please go out and play Paranoia at least once.
That sounds familiar.
It is glorious beyond. You're basically all clones that are all trying to not get killed, and you're trying to get everyone else killed when you're not getting killed. It is the most insane. It still might be the most insane RPG I've ever played in my life. Everyone should play it. It's awesome. But on the flip side, I can remember back in high school, we were the younger play group, and we had this slightly older play group that we kind of brushed up a little bit. They were telling a story. They'd been playing in a Call of Cthulhu game every week for like 2.5 years in high school. Back when you could do that. And one of the guys was saving a cigar to light up at the very end when they'd finally been able to kill the high priest and stop the cult dead in its tracks, right?
I'm so worried about his gamble.
I know, right? Okay. So then one of the players in the group, because it's Cthulhu, had gotten a madness. And of course, this is back in the 80s when they put, every wacky thing in those tables you can imagine. And one of them was a phobia of cigars, for heaven's sake. Okay. And he got that. And then another year goes by and they're finally loaded to bear, perfect end of a Shadowrun type of thing, loaded to bear, crawling down the staircase down into the basement. They're going to fling open the doors. A ritual is underway, so they're going to catch him by surprise, wipe the cold out. They're going to win, and the guy can't help himself, and he pulls the cigar out and lights it early. And so then the other so again, 2.5 years of every single week, the emotional investment, the story investment, all of it. And what does the guy do that has the phobia? Totally freaks out, screams like a little girl, drops his guns on the ground, and runs away. TPK, total party kill. Right? And there'd be some people that I know that would be like, no way, I would never do that. But for me, it was mind shattering that you could be so much in your character that you would be willing to burn it all to the ground, which I then did later. The same thing. I was in a big campaign for the longest time and ended up, burning half of it. Was a Earth Dawn campaign.
Oh yeah.
And I burned like half of the group down because I threw up a horror flare or something like that. Because that's what a horror stalker would do. Threw it up in the air and the horrors are all right there and they all chomped on us real good. They had a good breakfast that day. And
it's
to me,
it
was about the integrity of the character, right? And so again, not saying it must always be that way, but if everyone can have that moment, they would be role players for the rest of their lives, right? They would know why it's glorious to role play.
Well, and plus it just opens up the world of possibilities as far as like my freedom in this world
is limitless.
Exactly.
Yep, limitless.
So playing to your character is the most that you can do, but it's also a lot of the time the best thing that you can do.
Well, and it comes back to, I remember in the early aughts, waxing nostalgic a little bit. In the early aughts in our industry, RPGs were dying. And everyone's freaking out, and the industry's like, and Skyrim had just come out, right?
Right.
Skyrim's glorious. I've played it endlessly. I've bought literally every edition ever that exists for Skyrim. Yeah, go to Skyrim. Oh, how many hours? Oh, I don't even want to say it out loud.
Okay, well, I can start 900. I did 300 each main line.
I might be close to that.
Really?
Yeah, I have a lot. It's one of the only I dabble in computer games, although I think Civ 2
That's fair.
was unholy, right? Like I had to uninstall it after a while, or else I would, it's the first time both me and my wife fell down the rabbit hole. So we were just married. Civ 2 had come out, and I was working graveyard. So I would get home and I'd walk in and Tara's playing. And she'd look over her shoulder. Oh, no, that's not possible. Oh, quick. And she'd run and sprint and take the shower and go. And I'd be like, I'm just going to check on my Civ. I'm just going to check on my Civ. And then 6 o'clock in the evening, she'd walk in and I'd look over my shoulder. No! Oh my gosh! And I'd sprint. And luckily we were young and stupid and we could do that. But we did that for like a week or two and I finally had to uninstall it, right? Skyrim's kind of another one of those that sucked me in. But last little bit, because I think we're about out of time. But I think there's a good way to wrap it up. That it was all doom and gloom, right? It's all going to die. And I remember Bryn and Christian's Bryn's best friend. We go to a RPG or go to just a science fiction convention, and they had never role played. They'd grown up playing games. We just hadn't gotten to role playing yet, right? So they had played every console there was, every handheld device, every board game, miniature game, you name it. And they are like, "Ooh, D&D's being played. Can we go play that?" Because I was doing demos and running panels. And I'm like, "Sure, go do it." And they played for like 7 hours, right? And they were immediately like, "Please, please, please, can you run it for me?" Right? And so to my mind, I'm like, I back when Tumblr was a thing, right? All those years ago, I went up on my soapbox that I do every once in a blue moon. I was kind of yelling at the industry, like, "You're all wrong." That's like saying you love chocolate, and then that new chocolate thing over there, you don't want that chocolate, right? There's no such thing as too much, right? It's just we can't figure out how to get people in front of RPGs. That was our problem. And by the way, our until very recently, that has always been across the entire history. It's always been that. And when I was a kid, I felt forced out to go find my geekdom, right? Get my geek on. And so then, I found the comic book shop, and and the kids in the library playing with the funny shaped dice. Oh my gosh, what's that, right? Whereas they had wonderful handheld devices and Game Boys and all this, so their geek was mostly filled, so they weren't forced to find it.
It's true, but it can also work as a gateway.
But that's what I'm saying. The moment they found it, oh my gosh! And of course, we had no idea that within a couple of years, streaming and Twitch and beautiful people playing RPGs would show us all that would show everyone else that no, it's easy. You just sit down and make crap up and have fun, right?
Exactly.
And suddenly the whole world is playing RPGs. And so it is a glorious, magical moment. I every once in a while, the old man in me will be, I hate you all. Because I grew up when you'd get pantsed by walking around with the D&D book. But the vast majority,
hypocrites.
Exactly. But 99% of the time, I bask in the glory that it's everywhere, and I no longer have the weird looks when I go to church and they're like, "What do you do?" And I'm like, "Well, I game and I do D&D," and they're giving me a weird look, as opposed to now they're like, "Yeah, my kids play that. I was thinking about trying it. You bet. You want me over?" So it's just, I think it's just the most amazing, glorious time to be a geek and to be playing games, and it's just going to keep getting bigger and bigger.
No, absolutely.
So, good way to end since, I think Rem's here to dye my hair pink.
That's about perfect.
Yeah. Good time to wrap up.
Thank you so much, Randall.
Oh, absolutely. No, this was, obviously, hopefully you can hear the joy and enthusiasm. I could talk about this for endless hours.
No, absolutely.
So love it to death. Thanks for having me on.